There you go.
Great. I don't go to slide. Yeah, thank you. All right, yep.
Kamillah.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you all. Our next panel is entitled Engaging Race and Class in Collaborations for Environmental Justice. We have some terrific panelists here. Kamillah Ealom of the Bayview Hunters Point Community Organization and also Program Coordinator for Greenaction. Roberto Gil from Sacred Heart Community Service and Matt Holmes from the California Environmental Justice Collaborative. The moderator for our panel is Professor Margaret Russell, my wonderful colleague who until recently was also the Associate Provost for Diversity and Inclusion, and she's just done so much work on restorative justice and so many other related topics. And I'll leave it to Professor Russell here to provide a overview of our panel and also to introduce our panelists specifically. Please welcome the panelists and the moderator.
Thank you so much, my colleague and friend from the law school, and meaning a real friend, not just like you should say, oh, my friend. I actually wanted to start by just welcoming you all and expanding a little bit on Siming's comment about my interest in restorative justice, which is described in many different ways, but in the law school context I teach it in, it's very much focused on diversion from criminal justice alternatives and sort of the idea of victim offender dialogue, accountability, and community. What I have learned and what I think drew me to restorative justice all along is that in the broader context, when we talk about our history, the last panel was a fantastic example. When we talk about our history, the definition of harm and who is the victim and who is the offender and what is the accountability and the remedy is so much larger than just individual relationships. So I'm really honored to moderate this panel and engage in those kinds of broader discussions about structural change. In terms of the past involvement of Santa Clara University, the university hosted a conference called Environmental Justice and the Common Good in 2019. And at the conference, organizational tools and constructive conversations on how to collaborate with grassroots community-based organizations were developed in hopes of promoting an interdisciplinary approach to supporting environmental justice initiatives. Workshop sessions and panels about how to conduct community-based research were abundant. Additionally, there were initial conversations about how partnerships between the community and academia can be beneficial for everyone. Now, 4 years later, Santa Clara is hosting the conference again. And this time we'd like to look at what the fruit of the last conference created is, and to talk about how we improve partnerships in all of these areas, partnerships, research, and training. So today's focus of this panel it's titled Engaging Race and Class in Collaborations for Environmental Justice. And we're focusing on how community ties with academic institutions contributed to improving environmental justice collaborations while taking into account how race and class affects access to resources. The aim of the panel is to have an honest conversation about, again, the restorative justice word, accountability, harm, to have an honest conversation about how partnerships and collaborations between community organizations and academic institutions work. We hope to recenter community voices and advocacy while also acknowledging the benefits and burdens associated with working together for purposes of expanding environmental justice projects and goals. As someone who has taught and researched and spoken a lot on, thought a lot about restorative justice and these broader structural harms, I really see critical connections between the themes of this panel. And I hope that this will be a great opportunity to discuss methods and models of partnership and analyze whether current practices work or if it is time again to adapt to the ever-changing environmental landscape. Now, we have great speakers, and what I'd like to do is is read their bios first, each of them, and then go back beginning with Kamillah, and then go down the road and have discussions followed by some roundtable type questions and then Q&A. Okay, so Kamillah, Bayview Hunters Point Community Organizer, Program Coordinator, welcome. Kamillah is Greenaction's Bayview Hunters Point Community Organizer and Program Coordinator. A San Francisco native, Kamillah was born and raised in the Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood. Kamillah resides in the Bayview and advocates for health and environmental justice. She received her bachelor's in sociology from Dillard University and is currently studying for her master's in public health at San Jose State University. Suffering from asthma her entire life, Kamillah is passionate about informing and mobilizing her community regarding the neighboring toxins that impact them. Kamillah actively works with our many community partners, campaigns including advocating for full cleanup of the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard Superfund site and other contamination sites, and ending industrial pollution that impacts the air residents breathe. Kamillah is the coordinator of the Bayview Hunters Point Environmental Justice Response Task Force that brings together residents, community, and environmental justice groups, and local, regional, state, and federal agencies to respond to community complaints about pollution. Kamillah is a strong community organizer in the front lines, galvanizing and actively getting the community involved regarding health and environmental justice issues in the Bayview Hunters Point community. Kamillah is vested in her community where she grew up, believing that change comes from those most impacted. Roberto Gil. Actually, let me introduce Matt first, could you? Gil. Okay, Matt Holmes, welcome. Project Director, California Environmental Justice Collaborative. You are a steering committee member with the San Joaquin Valley-based Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, CVAQ, and the statewide California Environmental Justice Coalition, CEJC, a coalition of grassroots EJ organizations who believe that community members know the best way to address their community's issues. He's worked as a teacher in San Francisco and acquired an MA in US history from San Francisco State University with an emphasis in Indian white relations military history. Matt served as a student intern and volunteer with the National Park Service at various historic and public lands across the Bay Area. He also participated in 2 years of applied research internships with the Archdiocese of San Francisco at the Old Mission Dolores, which provided Matt with knowledge of California's history of white violence, exploitation, discrimination, and genocide. In 2009, Matt was hired as a National Park Ranger in Contra Costa County at John Muir National Historic Site in Martinez, Eugene O'Neill National Historic Site in Danville, Port Chicago Naval Weapons Magazine National Memorial Military Ocean Terminal Concord, and Rosie the Riveter World War II Homefront National Historical Park in Richmond. As a ranger, Matt developed education and training programs focused on urban conservation, workforce development, and citizen science strategies. In 2020, a confluence of environmental justice initiatives in Stockton provided an opportunity for Matt to pursue his passion serving with Little Manila Rising, a nonprofit serving South Stockton and the Inner Delta. Matt is passionate about helping to grow a network of committed community partners and agency professionals who share an interest in accelerating the reparatory work California needs. Currently, he serves as a project director for the California Environmental Justice Collaborative. And welcome, Roberto Gil, Director of Organizational Development at Sacred Heart Community. Roberto is the Director of Organizational Development at Sacred Heart Community Service, a nonprofit organization that is located in San Jose, California. He has 20 years of experience in the nonprofit field. His experience ranges from organizational development, child, youth, and adult education programming, systems change, employment services, and asset development programs to urban gardening, food justice, and policy and community organizing. All the work and programs he leads at his agency involve building individual empowerment, mutual support networks, and collective power by pushing for more equitable systems in Santa Clara County. He holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from San Jose State University and a Master of Arts in Educational Leadership and Administration from Santa Clara University. He is passionate about transformational leadership, community-led prevention and intervention, political education, and working towards building power in marginalized communities to work towards structural change. So I wanted to welcome all of you and thank you for being here. There is such a wealth of talent that I just want to begin with each speaker having about 10 minutes, and then we'll follow that by some discussion. Camillah?
Thank you, Margaret, and thank you so much, Santa Clara University, for inviting me here today. My name is Kamillah Ealom, and I am the program coordinator and community organizer for Greenaction for Health and Environmental Justice. But most importantly, I'd like to state that I am a resident of Bayview Hunters Point, the community that I do serve. And I am a San Francisco native, third generational community organizer, who a third generation impacted a community organizer. I have suffered from asthma as early as 3 years old. My childhood memories are basically living in the 6th floor pediatric unit at San Francisco General Hospital as I received numerous treatments for my asthma attacks, which in turn gave me, it manipulated the constant steroid use manipulated my growth spur. And I've suffered from musculoskeletal disorders, as well as suffering from migraines and constant asthma attacks still to this day. And so being severely impacted every stage of your life definitely keeps you in the front lines, as well as being afforded to go away to college and coming back and realizing that there's a disconnect between the impacts and the knowledge known within your community. Bayview Hunters Point, we have about 35,000 community members, and most of them, they're not even aware that we are surrounded by some of the largest contaminants and industrialized sources in the country. And so it is my duty to inform, educate, mobilize, and galvanize and re-galvanize my community as I prepare them to be civically engaging with those accountable for creating the regulations and enforcing the regulations that afford us the equality air and equality life. I was just speaking to my daughter today and stating that I've been speaking with so many of her peers, as my daughter is a graduating senior from George Washington University on her way to Columbia University studying public health. I'm on another full scholarship. I've been afforded to work with Stanford students, Santa Clara students, UC Berkeley students, and San Jose State students, and who I'm also in the graduate program as well for public health. So it really was a real good feeling working with undergraduates studying public health. So again, I'm just so honored to be able to share our true testament, as well as invite you to our community, as you can see how it personally feels to be on a toxic tour site where I live is closest to the shoreline. So basically, it's where sea level rise and groundwater rise meet. And so it is my duty to galvanize my community, as I am aware of the systemic racism and how this is just a repeated cycle of how my community and as a member of the BIPOC community, how we are always set last and put last. You know, if you're from the Bay Area, you've definitely witnessed in a couple of years ago, 2020 and 2021, increase of folks coming from all over the country and other continents. And, you know, again, because we have suffered from gentrification, we are on the ground floors. We're on the grounds. We're on the streets. We're suffering from, being dislocated and gentrification. So we see the newcomers coming in and the transients coming in and directly being streamlined into mainstream society through job availability, right, and access, right, to the workforce. Excuse me. And so we see that. And so again, that just aids the systemic racism that we have been subjected to for generations, for decades. And so it is my duty to build leaders from the BIPOC community, as well as to advocate for these inequalities and try to come up with effective solutions. So I am very grateful for this engagement and you all's interest and continued support, because that's what it takes. It takes a collaborative effort. It takes someone on the inside to mention what's going on the outside. So I just want to thank you again for having me today, and I look forward to engaging this discussion. Thank you.
So much. So Matt, if I could just take a moment before you start, I wanted to mention a report that was issued in December of 2022, reflecting a lot of work of the Environmental Justice Law and Advocacy Lab, called The Stench of Sustainability, Monitoring Darling's Animal Rendering Plant in an Overpolluted Community. And its authors, Zaya Bomani, Elias Rodriguez, Emily Petrode, Hannah Trio, Grace, I'm sorry if I'm about mispronouncing these names, Grace Yonkers Towles, a report for Greenaction for Health and Environmental Justice, developed by the Law and Advocacy Lab of the Environmental Justice Common Good Initiative at Santa Clara University. And we'll have information about how you can get easy access to that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matt.
Okay, so my name is Matt Holmes. I have the privilege of living in Stockton, California, but I'm from a place called Lassen County, which is north of Reno. Got a family in between, you know what Susanville is. Otherwise, you don't. And I grew up really illiterate of the world. A rural white that knew a lot about like big pickup trucks. I played football. Ended up at UC Davis, and then ended up as like a scab substitute teacher in San Francisco Unified. Okay. Oh, you're a great teacher. You just don't have to pay your dinner. You're a scab sub. And I bet like half your class was full of white boys like me coming around acting like they were teachers. So I got hip to the reality of planned pollution, planned disease, white violence, and planned environment while working at Carver Elementary in Huntington. That was the first place I had to tear apart a kid's backpack because their life was in danger because they needed a life-saving drug, a steroidal inhalant, that someone decided they should get and somebody else's kids shouldn't get, right? Like we all understand asthma doesn't just show up in some neighborhood. It's a planned disease. It only shows up where we point. And so Hunters Point is one of those places that takes those lumps. I had the privilege of being a park ranger in Richmond, California for 15 years, and the home of the most productive shipyards in all of human history, where women and people of color built machines that won World War II. Truly a valorous accomplishment. Only they weren't allowed to move out to Walnut Creek. They weren't allowed to move out to Concord, because those were whites only federally developed housing opportunities that had whites only covenants, right? So the Black war workers who helped us beat the Nazis, forgot about that real quick, always reacted like Nazis a lot of that time too, and trapped it in historic neighborhoods and divested from those neighborhoods and decided that these are powerless places where we can just co-locate everything. Not only got the Chevron refinery in Richmond, we've also got all the Bay Area's metal recycling, all the Bay Area's dumps. You know, you go to Richmond, you have the largest methane emitter in the whole Bay Area sitting in the middle of Richmond, all sorts of toxic organic gases coming off of that. And it's everybody in the East Bay's garbage. You drive it through the rich, get to the gate, you realize how much it costs to dump your stuff. You turn around, you throw it out in one of my parks. I picked up so much litter in Richmond. I actually love it. I think it's kind of like my atonement is picking up garbage for everybody. You know, it wasn't like hot Cheetos bags and soda bottles. It was like construction equipment. It was from people flipping their houses and burgers. So there's all these dynamics between first and second world communities that are anchored in that history of defining a place as powerless. And I wanna like, if anybody remembers anything I say today, which is to remember that all of that power is anchored in a discrete act of white violence. At some point somewhere, white folks hurt somebody to take something that wasn't there. I don't want you to feel bad. Like I know a ton of white people. Some of them are my friends. You know, it's not your fault. You weren't around. The only thing that's your fault is if you decide to play dumb after the death, right? And so we have to like stand in solidarity with communities of color who we know ended up with too much on their plate because society externalized our costs onto them. And we don't do that as an act of charity. We do that because nobody gets through unless we get through together, right? And so you don't go in and save a place. You go in and ask a place, what the hell do I need to know to save this place, right? So there was a literacy Kamillah was talking about. Like you don't go into Hunter's Point and tell them how to fix their problem. Nobody knows better than those who are impacted how to alleviate their own suffering. And that's true for all of our communities. There's a scale of environmental justice, right? Many of you are probably, everybody loves to map us to death. So there's a Calvin screen, pollution burdens and benefits from the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. And you can look at it for sure. The Bay Area, Hunters Point, Richmond, East Palo Alto, or whatever they're trying to call it these days, still the same spot. You can see the map of poverty in the Bay Area. You can also see the greater state, right? The Bay Area, with the exception, with a few notable exceptions, Superfund sites, Bay Area is doing all right going on the first one. Gus and Hector and I know what second-class California looks like. And Bakersfield wishes it had stopping problems, right? Like I've been to the southern San Joaquin Valley. And we're talking about a place that is home to a history of white displacement, genocidal displacement through the Homestead Act, white militias removing tribal peoples and precluding people of color from owning land. Ownership is how we protect ourselves. What you have now in the southern San Joaquin Valley are giant multi-generational mega rich landlords. Probably got some buildings named after. And these are folks that have overseen the greatest wealth creating region in all of human history, and simultaneously home to the most poverty impacted households in all of North America. So this is what this comes down to. A lot of times we find ourselves in an environmental framework. And oh, I should have asked my friend, how many environmental scientists do we have in here? It's okay, you raise your hand. Okay, how many history workers? You got anybody ready to do history? Three of them. Everybody else, you guys all gonna be planners? I have to ask, because you'll find yourself in so-called technical framings, right? Where like you have engineers and atmospheric chemists, they're my favorite. They have no idea how the world works. They just know how the sky works. A handful of them actually have, some literature to figure out how the world works. But my point is that there's a lot of our problems in our communities are like characterized as technical conundrums and who done it? How do we get it? I call BS on it. We know exactly how we got here. New Almaden doesn't need an environmental justice like AB 617 community does, right? Montecito doesn't need it because they have power. They have something we don't have. And so as we root things in power, and we try to address that power, you'll find yourself contending with the government, some of whom are less sincere than you might think. Hector and I, Gus and I, we've all been through something called AB 617, which is sort of like California's guilt trip for the cap and trade program. So they thought they'd buy off 15 communities. You guys finally made it in. Welcome to the party.
Thank you.
It's not going to work. Take the paper and do what you can with it. And we were contending with governments who are in the process of sort of laundering this power dynamic into the planning region. And we were outgunned. They had decades of apologetic research, and they had tons of atmospheric chemists, planners, and all these well-heeled folks that knew more than we did at the neighborhood level. But we were able to kind of flip that script, and we did that through academic and community partnerships, right? We partnered with Iris over here, our friend Esther from uphill at Stanford. Stanford, what are you gonna do? Got 11 minutes every once in a while. And our friends from UC Berkeley. And we brought out a bunch of really diligent, hardworking college students who did really terribly boring research, right? Like looking at thousands of months of like inventory emission sources from stationary and mobile emission sources, and helped us actually chew on our problem. So that when we showed up in a meeting with a regional air pollution control district out in San Joaquin Valley that's a captured agency and has no interest in me having a first world lifestyle, and we were able to contend with them with relatively useful technical information. That was sort of thinking on our feet and pulling off community-based research in the middle of a fire. And I would highly, I'm in other dynamics with the University of California, Merced, where we're in on the ground level, we're designing the research project as literate community members. And those universities have ceded power to us. They've said, how do you want to tackle this? What's your first problem, right? And so, we're not going to be able to solve everybody's problems, but if you show up at somebody's house and you start working on your problem, even though their biggest problem is something else, your help is going to be unwelcome. So we've been able to learn from our AB 617 process, the support we got from, well-trained, well-meaning academic partners, to realize that we have a right to demand authorship and take direction over our own research, because that research is what we need to contend with the institutions that are super comfortable with our advanced mortality rates, long-term birth rates, COPD rates, giving kids steroids instead of cleaning up their air. So, really always eager to support these types of settings where we can meet potential research partners and get out in front of, the setting. We can upset that setting. So, I'm gonna shut up. Just make me stop.
You're amazing. You're exactly on time. Well, thank you.
Some people are. Oh, they're better off.
The microphone's off or on? Okay, all right.
Testing.
All right, next. Thank you, Roberto.
So hi everyone, really happy to be here. I'm excited to be on the panel. And so, I worked at Sacred Heart Community Service, which is the community action agency of Santa Clara County. Shout out to fellow Sacred Heart colleagues. And when I've been there for 17 years, and I came to work at Sacred Heart because many of us that go into the social impact nonprofit world is because we have a passion to address a problem, a social problem that either impacted us or that we've seen that impact us personally, like we have lived experiences, or we care about it because it's impacted people we love, or we're just those human beings that really want to make a change in this world. This is the last thing. And when I came to Sacred Heart was still social services kind of charity organization. Our organization was founded in 1964 by a woman named Louise Benson. That in the 60s, right, in the 60s civil rights movement, the war on poverty happened. She had a calling, right? So she saw people in her community in San Jose. She lived if you're familiar with San Jose, she lived in Little Manila, which is a predominantly wealthy $2 million home in San Jose. My daughter goes to school, one of the schools, like a couple streets down from where the Louise is and Benson live. They're not big homes, right? If you've ever been in the Bay Area, you see a $2 million home, and it's not very big. I grew up in the Central Valley, very different from you. So when she had this calling, she saw people in her community suffering, having food insecurity. So she started giving out food. So she grabbed a bunch of people from her church. She said, "Hey, I'm going to start doing this." Talking about these systems of oppression and also racism and historical and structural racism. Eventually, those people in the community didn't want her there, right? Because they didn't want those people coming into their neighborhood. And so over the years, it became a large nonprofit. So when I came in 17 years ago, it still had those remnants, right? Her name is Sacred Heart. because one of the places that helped the organization go and develop was the local parish called Sacred Heart of Jesus. And so then it became a nonprofit that adopted the name Sacred Heart Community Service. So when I came in, it still had those remedies, right? It's like help the poor. We have about, it's changed after the pandemic, but over the years, we have a lot of volunteers come in, anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 volunteers that come to our doors to help to be a part of us providing resources and building solidarity with our community that comes in our doors. That it's about 60,000 to 70,000 a year. So when I came in, it was still that charity model, and my background is I grew up in the Central Valley, specifically in Madera, California, near Fresno. And it's the heart, the Central Valley feeds, a big portion of the world, right? Big farmland. And my family came and migrated from Mexico. My paternal grandfather was in the Bracero program. So in like the 50s, there was this program that brought people from Mexico and other countries to do work in farms and other areas that because of the world wars, there wasn't enough workers. And that caused a whole lot of problems for my family over generations that I learned from that. And so I do this work because of all the systems that were broken for me. Not that they're broken for me, right? They were intentional for me not to get a higher education. My parents went to 3rd and 5th grade, right? Because in the history was like, their country wasn't able to provide enough for them. So they came to the U.S. And so when I started working at Sacred Heart, I had all these lived experiences that I was like, I want to work somewhere. I want to have a career where I'm making a difference. So I went to work there and work in the education program. But when I walked in and as I learned, our impact was very minimal, right? I remember one of my supervisors telling me, he's like, because I would say like, hey, like look at all the good we're doing. Look at all these students contracted to go to college, these students contracted to do this, right? We have great relationship with families. He's like, but is that the rule or is that the exception? It's like, how do we build our work to be the for children failing to be the exception, right? And that really impacted me. So over these 17 years, the reason why I've been at Sacred Heart so long is because we moved from this charity model to this power building organization where we said, we want to provide resources, really important resources that families that need and our community needs because they have been oppressed. They're trying to live within these systems of oppression, especially in Silicon Valley. But we also want to make tangible changes in people's lives by changing policy and building power. And we believe we do that with the and that is echoing everywhere we do. And for me in the environmental justice piece, so I didn't go into this work thinking about the intersectionality between the environment and climate and the challenges that I saw throughout my life, and the challenges that I see of the people I work with and I build relationships with through years. But being a part of La Mesa Verde, which is our urban garden food justice program, seeing our essential services and those essential food programs, really helped me understand working with Chris Bayview in the environmental justice program. Really appreciate having me see something different. And even on my drive here, I was thinking like in my personal life, how I've seen family members die of cancer that was linked to like just the pesticides that were used in Central Valley, right? And just thinking about how that intersectionality is finding, any other example that we have are needed, but we believe at Sacred Heart that poverty and oppression is not inevitable, right? It's like it's done on purpose. But that's why we also believe in building power and solidarity to address those problems.
Great, thank you. I don't need to be here. Everybody's timing themselves, and it's just beautiful. So the next part, and I do want to say, the next two parts before we break at noon. I'm going to ask some questions that, we've kind of talked about a little bit. And, and I want you to start thinking now, because then you have a chance to ask questions. I say this to my students, just giving you advance warning. But let me start with a couple of questions. I think you have all mentioned to some extent positives, but this question is about, in recent years, especially given the increasing acknowledgement of the importance of environmental justice, what positive changes have you seen as a result of people, universities, academics trying to engage with community organizations in a substantial way? Who would like to? Kamillah?
Well, since I've kind of been engaging with them on an increased level, and excuse me, I did take some notes. It keeps me from getting emotional, so excuse me. But so it's bittersweet. I'm just here to be honest. It comes off like we're treated like a newborn baby, right? Everyone is giving us their immediate attention. However, as they see that we are dealing with decades of generational systemic racism that takes endurance and consistency. And, the more we attend banners, and we have banners, we attend rallies, but when it's really time to do the work, like write the letters to our board of supervisors, to our mayors, on behalf of BIPOC communities, from the institution, or department heads, but really from the institution. I feel like we've came and talking about community leaders from Greenaction, from the Bayview Hunters Point, we've come and been a part of so many different panels and so many different workshops and so many different, meetings with you all that, I'm gonna be honest, we should at least have one institution, supporting us in writing, that we should be able to tangibly pass on to the Navy, to the board of supervisors, to the mayor, and so again, for me, I love informing, love educating, love sharing my experience, love bringing you into my community. But for me to been afforded to go to, not only Dillard University, but Philip Burton Academic High School, right on Manziel in San Francisco, a predominantly academic high school, African-American high school, that afforded me to go to Dillard. So it's hard for me not to feel like I'm on some type of block. It's hard for me to not feel like I'm some type of inferior community member that is being looked as some type of scientific experiment. So I would like to see more institutions and departments providing us letters of support, as we, share our experiences and, we come together and engage regarding our generations and in putting a life behind, the stories and the histories that you're learning about. So that's what I would like to see. But other than that, I really love the allyship, and just showing up. Because again, this has been going on, people in my community, we have experienced, and this is people in my community all over the country have experienced third war experiences right in the United States, while mainstream America thrives, so again, as I hear from folks from indigenous tribal lands and, from other areas, it's like, we're one of the same because we are experiencing that right now. Currently, post-gentrification, they moved every Black San Francisco native from the BIPOC community. They built outward the city, closest to the shoreline, closest to the radioactive toxic waste, built on that and put us all right there. This is going on 2023, and then they're upset that we're rallying to stop them from continuously building. And and anti-community, right? But again, we're standing up for our community. So these are the things that we're going up against. So that's why we love the bodies. We would love your entities, your influence as a body, as an institutional body, to give us a letter of support, something tangible, uh, you know, as receipt of all of our engagements. Thank you.
Yeah. Roberto, Matt, anything that you'd like to add?
And my brother went to Harvard.
That institutionalization of this fight and the struggle, there's a ton of learning, right? Losing some elders, like losing a lot of knowledge. Maybe just as much, a whole bunch of folks up there with tenure. And there's something about public good, universities, and research institutions setting up shop where we operate. It's how you put skin in the game. It's how a university shows that they really care about a place that they're working in. And not just scraping PhDs out of the place. When I was in Richmond for 15 years, didn't have any idea how many PhDs come out of Berkeley, selling and suffering in Richmond. It is a gross figure. Everybody here knows what a pimp is, right? Universities can be pimps too. Sell somebody else's suffering, and sharing that suffering, super gross thing to be a part of. I will say it's getting a lot better, and I mean it's getting a lot better. Some people are way less standards than we were, and I think there's been a wave of, baby boomers that got enough Sesame Street in them. I used to work when I was in Richmond. I was like 25 years old, and everybody I hung out with black women. Like God, I drove people around like events and stuff. It was great. This Betty reads off and the famous park ranger up there. Her greatest civil rights heroes were Mr. Rogers and Jim Henson. Kermit the Frog taught people that it wasn't easy being green in Sesame Street. Like humans got white people. You have to remember how brutal y'all's grandparents cannot. Better. We cannot forget how brutal white culture has been in this country. Like while we were fighting the Nazis, we had two gates. We made sure black folks walked through a separate gate from the same parking lot to the same shipyard because we needed them to know they weren't first-class citizens at the end of the day. We put it while we were helping them defeat the Japanese army, which was doing some of the most brutal stuff in all human history. We put a little secret T on their training badge so that they couldn't get credit for the amount of hours and training that they received during World War II. We fought the Nazis and we kept the same playbook as them. So we can't let grandma and grandpa off the hook that they didn't know any better. I'm not telling you to drop modern values on historic people. You have to understand what they went through. But that's still a white perspective on allowing how much of that history you're willing to let into your American story. Communities of color, they have a master's degree in this stuff. And so there's been a growth, but there hasn't been enough growth, and it's going to take courageous leadership and maybe mission-driven universities to lead the way on how to really engage with communities in an authentic way. And that usually comes from showing up with cash, paying people for their time, and above all, ceding power on direction and outcomes.
I will say that the success I've experienced working with university and professors has been one that's rooted in everyone coming into the community, understanding their privileges, using their gifts for good, right? But understanding how those gifts show up in the community. And the other thing is long-term commitment, right? And I would say that in my experience of working with and collaborating with university, the collaborations that are really deep and and really made an impact are ones led by professors who are really committed in their own personal being to the cause and the project they're doing, right? And sometimes that goes beyond what the university is asking them to do, right? It's not just about research, they're really connected to the mission, right? For example, Santa Clara University, their mission is really aligned with really trying to make tangible changes to the impact people have, especially on poverty and depression. And so when that comes in and there's a long-term connection, you see an impact, right? For me being a nonprofit practitioner and someone that's working programs like directly with people in programs and providing resources, it's always helpful to have a thought partner and also someone who really cares. I've seen, I've had the experience to take small kind of projects and ideas and really scale them up with the professor and with the community, and just kind of everyone come together and build a team that is really trying to like address a problem in the community with the community, right? And just really drive it in the long term, like have a long-term plan. I don't always see that. I also have the privilege of being an adjunct in the Elite Scholars Program, which is the first generation program here, and I teach a course called mission-driven, social benefit, mission-driven vocation. And we're having some technical issues. Hopefully they're hearing me now. I thought that was my like 2 minute or 1 minute, cut it off, but ultimately I think my point is it's a long-term committed relationship, and we have to understand our privileges, but we also have to be connected to the mission of it individually, but also institutionally. And the university can provide that with funding. I've seen professors struggle with not having enough funding, not having enough support to stay there, or having all these other strings pulling at them that they can't fully commit to that project, right? And because in the community side, right, what you see is you see these short-term projects that don't last a long time, and that can be impactful too, right? So, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask another question here. In what ways do you go around poorly made environmental policy to actually provide substantial support to communities who are often overlooked in the process of policy creation?
Okay, I'll go. You're skipping around a little bit, but I got you. So we, as a result of dealing with the constant shuffle of government agencies and government officials within these departments, we have found out ways to get through it, because that is an obstacle when we get to that. But so how we deal with that, we gain personal relationships with these folks who are newly coming into these government agencies. And we, instead of, getting frustrated because we see the strategy behind that, we take advantage of it by immediately forging relationships with them in the beginning of their career, right? Letting them see our side and our story firsthand immediately, and continually inviting them to our events and keeping them updated with what's going on. And so forming those relationships, they become our voice. They become the folks that really give us a seat at the table, and again, it's just history books. That's just how we've had to survive in this country since our existence. And so it's hurtful at the end of the night when I go home, but 9 to 5, I do what I have to do. So we have forged relationships. I'm so proud. First of all, I just want to give a shout out to the Santa Clara University students who came out to the People's Earth Day this past Saturday. I truly appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. That just became an idea, and it came out to be a big event. And so thank you so much. We've seen you out there. But again, we've seen, I wasn't afraid, a lot of us, again, from our piece of being impacted by the systemic stuff, right? A lot of us have become withdrawn. This new generation, I'm so thankful. I wasn't afraid and intimidated to invite Cali, PA to our rally, right? Invite DTSC to our People's Earth Day rally, right? And I was just so thankful but that's what it takes, right? And so I was so thankful that Rachel Zellweger from Cali, PA actually showed up. These are some folks that are still dealing, like you said, the technical piece. So it's my piece, the communal piece mitigates that. And I educate them and giving them a personal person and lives on the other end. And it resonates with them. I seen her out there with her 2 children. And so I see her personal interest in our concerns. And again, she connected me with, they never really tell you who they know. So when they tell you who they know in other government, across other agencies, you have an ally. And so I had her connect me with Todd Sachs, who is the new deputy director of DTSC. And so now we have forged a relationship to where we are forming a coalition committee, if you will, of community leaders and government officials, because we understand that the government officials may be intimidated to just come in front of the community, right? So we want to give everyone a safe place, a trusted place, so we can literally get to the bottom of our issues and get to some real effective resolutions. So again, forming those offline relationships have aided me to now be able to come to the community and say, look, I have a coalition, and our effective engagements have already gotten us engaging with the Navy. That has been the hardest thing on every level of government for folks to do, is to get in contact with the Navy. They are like some big goo. Now I'm realizing they are the big mega player in all of this. You can't tell them nothing, And so for me to have DTSC ask us, what does success look like for Bayview Hunters Point? What are your demands, as far as your environmental justice demands regarding the shipyard? And then take our demands of what our success looks like, all our feedback directly to the Navy, directly to the EPA. That's unfortunately how we got to get our success, but that resulted in a huge victory. And again, our relationships that we formed with the Air District. As a result, in December, Recology, the concrete plant, will be closing down, right? Which emit large amounts of VOCs, right? Due to our high mile winds going straight to Hunters Point, right? Darling International, thank you so much again, just for your contribution to putting Darling on blast. As you see, I took that and ran with it. I took it right to the media, and did several interviews. The Darling International is my personal enemy, because I remember smelling you get on the 15 and you smell it as soon as you cross Evans. Every stage of my life. We call it ground zero. That was when all those type of terms, how we categorized our home and our neighborhood. That's what all those, when you constantly smell those odors and you constantly have to cover your nose or constantly feel sick to the bottom of your stomach, just going to school, just going to work, just going to go with your friends, go to the library. You take that in and you personalize it, so now being the age that I am now and seeing my daughter doing the same thing, Darling is an enemy of mine. So I'm really just so thankful for you all's report, helping us to share with the media. That was a news blast. We were able to literally bring public awareness to what's going on from Darling Animal Rendering Plant. So that's what it takes. It takes those informal conversations, those consistent conversations and relationships, for us to actually mitigate the lack of policy. Thanks. Great.
Yes, please, please.
I was thinking of this question. First, I think this question really makes me think around how when we think of policies that impact our communities or structural policies, that it's always the how are we going to use a Band-Aid effect to address this problem, right? How are we going to go around it? And so, I think about how the importance of building power and organizing in community is really important, and how when you identify a policy, having the community strategize, identify who is the person or who are the people who can make that change, and going after that, going after them is a really important piece, right? And you think about the victories. And this week I listened to a speech by Angela Davis, civil rights activist, Black Panther professor at UC Santa Cruz. And she says something along the lines of, we can't expect policymakers or politicians to make changes to these problems, like these problems that affect people. When we've seen changes, is because the people that are directly impacted push for change. And that's true, right? And that's what I think about this. I think about our urban gardening and food justice program, La Mesa Verde at Sacred Heart. And the reason it started because we know that a lot of our impacted communities don't have access to nutritious food. It affects our children, it affects our families. And doing these urban gardening programs gives families and people an access to growing their own food, to growing the food, own organic food, and an understanding about how to grow their own food in a community that's different, especially in the population we work, which a high percentage of immigrant communities that maybe where they came from, they had access to grow food and they have all this deep knowledge around food. But here they grow up, they come to communities where the stores they have access to don't have that food, right? The marketing that we see don't have that food. Our policies aren't created in a way to have access to nutritious and quality food that those of us with more privilege have. So I think those are the things I think about. It's about pushing to change those policies, acknowledging our victories because we're pushing against a big giant. But yeah, it's definitely about acknowledging the victories and thinking around like these Band-Aid effects that are also needed. They're important resources.
I'll just add briefly that Kamillah gave you really great examples of how their work de-silos agencies, because all the brutal stuff happens in between agencies. Like, DTSC's got somebody on the front lines who's trying to do a good job, even though they work for DTSC, right? And when you talk to the Navy, you might get the good one at the Navy. But they're going to use the space in between those agencies to play dumb about the impacts on the community. So centering the community is the only place where those silos can be broken down. They don't break down unless folks are literate, right? Unless somebody schools them up on what they're dealing with. And it's sort of a delicate balance to work with a community in an education campaign and also learn from that community. And you really have to make it a collaborative workshop framework. Because you can show up college boy all you want, tell people what you think about them. You're not going to make a ton of friends if you don't ask a whole lot of questions.
Thank you so much. We have time for one or two questions. And because we want to make sure everybody hears your question and people online as well, I think there is a microphone out there. So please don't be shy.
Hello. Hi there. I have an offhand curiosity in the aquifer recharge ponds in the valley. And recently I noticed that the recharge pond at San Tomas and Bud is filled with water. Haven't seen it like that in a while. I'm just wondering if any of you would happen to know if I can rest easier about the drought, seeing that recharge pond filled at San Tomas and Bud.
So I think you asked about like water recharge, groundwater recharge in the valley because we had a wet year, and then all the ranchers complained that we were letting all the water go to waste by going out through the largest estuary on the west coast of both North and South America that supports all marine mammal life from Puget Sound to Baja California. That's not a value to your state of California. So water leaving through the Delta is considered a waste. So they all want to put it in dams. We have inadequate recharge infrastructure. These are sort of the floodplains that we've finally allowed people to fill and slowly soak. Yeah, we did recharge some water. What we really did though is we gave everybody about another 4 to 5 year pass to stop panicking about the drought, so that the panic that we go through about every 7 years, holy crap, we got to do something about the drought. Policymakers just got permission to bump stuff down the road. And so that's what I worry about. At the end of the day, people stealing water to grow food nobody eats or needs is our problem, right? Because we make wealth out of filling warehouses full of almonds for 2 rich folks in Beverly Hills to just let it rot in a warehouse. There are more knowledgeable Sigma people here. Gus probably knows more about groundwater than I do. Is there a follow-up?
Sorry, I just wanted to add in that the cannabis farmers are also using up a lot of water in California.
Yeah. Let me know when they get to pistachio numbers or alfalfa.
All right. Other question?
Hi. I had a question surrounding like being a student at Santa Clara. Like sometimes we might not always feel like we're represented by our university, or like, you know, like we feel like they have the best responses to these kinds of issues. So what are like actions or measures that we can take individually as students at, you know, whether it be Santa Clara, Stanford, Berkeley, whatever schools in the Bay Area, to kind of like do something about these issues, whether it be like legislation or community-based organizations and stuff like that?
Yeah, and thank you for that. You know, volunteer, intern, come to meetings, just be involved. You know, Greenaction is always looking for college students. And I love that. I believe that that is the key to having a different type of future, that just across the board. So, and it also educates me on the newer generation. And I'm just so proud of the interest, of the deep concern, and the willingness that you guys, bring to the table. It's very fresh and it's life-changing. And so please reach out to me, Kamillah, at Greenaction, or you can just go to the website and look at all of our fights. We also have victories and communities in Kettleman City and the Central Valley. We work with tons of indigenous groups as well as we have our allies, all over the Bay Area, as well as in the coastline in Louisiana and in Jackson, Mississippi. So yeah, a wide range, and if you just want to come and get educated, right? If you just want to just come into the community, please, we welcome that. So please, you could definitely reach out to Greenaction, reach out to me. I'd love to, see what we can do as far as seeing your interest and, what we have for you to do. Thanks.
If I can just add,
Please.
I would say locally, there are so many groups and organizations and people working on issues probably all of us care about in this room beyond environmental justice and environmental justice. And all of these groups and initiatives and fights need young people, right? We definitely need young people. And if you are a Santa Clara University student and you're looking how to get involved in the community, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to different people in the university, your professor, the Nation Center, who works with a lot of organizations in this county, in this area. But there's definitely stuff for you to be involved in. Your voice is highly important. We need to build a lot of power to push back around displacement, around environmental and climate issues, around social justice, reimagining public safety. So there's a bigger fight outside of your campus, but what you're doing on your campus as young folks is also really important to us, and we need your allyship.
Just briefly, absolutely right. Find your allies, but never expect this university to like champion your cause. Power is taken, and get comfortable with discomfort. You'll be fine.
Right. And on that note, I want to thank you all for your wisdom and encouragement. And I think let's have a hand, please. Lincoln.
Thank you so much to our moderator, Margaret Russell, and all of our panelists for a conversation that was both very sobering about hearing about your personal testimony as well as inspirational. And thank you for the suggestions about how